Welcome to Black and Blue, the podcast that's just for you. We bring solutions to everyday problems. We are here to humanize the badge by interviewing first responders and discussing their trainings, experiences, and publications. Black and Blue airs weekly at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tune in.
There was a little bit of a connection in that first drill. I went back to the next one, and then all of a sudden I'm starting to go more drills and starting to feel like, this stuff is cool. I really kind of like it. I like the camaraderie. I like the role that we have of being of service to the community. And so I joined the department, got my EMT and joined that ambulance corps, and really did it for 9 years until I kind of ran out of, I couldn't go any further with it in terms of putting through the ranks and what we were able to do as volunteers. And then I started testing for departments and got hired and started my road as a career firefighter in that direction. And that was incredibly, it had its ups and downs for sure. Certainly the beginning, probably of anybody's career when you're the new guy, it can be challenging to say the least, right? And humbling. And
absolutely.
I was no, exception to that. But along the way, I did have a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, which we can get into more. Was also blessed to be promoted to a rank of lieutenant. And that led to some really interesting challenges for me as an officer, because now you have a lot of responsibility. So that would tie into, my journey into mental health and wellness, and beyond that, kind of, what my mission is today. To find those things and make sure that, like I said, it's a practice, that we don't get so caught up in the job, and we don't get so caught up in, whatever it is, buying toys and playing with our toys, that we forget that there's a world inside, right? There's that world outside. It's very seductive, but there's a world inside, and that's the one that we need to feed. Otherwise, we get out of balance. Knowing what it feels like to be forced to ultimately, I was able to come back to the job, but the first thing I thought when I heard the diagnosis, or heard the full diagnosis, just so you know, like I heard you have cancer. Somehow I never heard stage 4 cancer. Wow. First thing I'm thinking is, what am I going to say to the guys? The shift, they're going to be down a guy. I'm going to miss being in the fire department and doing this. That was my, first thing. Of course, next is the family and every other thing that it affects. You can only process so much information. And I think if my wife wasn't there every step of the way to take notes and to ask questions, I would have missed so much pertinent stuff that the doctors were saying and the nurses were saying. But it really humbled me. It really made me kind of reset and regroup, in that, first of all, I wanted to get well and get back to the job, and I would do anything it took. But also, I wanted to look at it as a gift, not like being a victim to this horrible circumstance. There had to be a gift in it someplace. So it took me a while to figure it out, but then I realized, my wife we'd go out on walks in the middle of January. It was, cold, snowy winter. And she'd say, let's just say what we're grateful for. And so she'd give me 3 statements, what she was grateful for. And then I'd do 3 statements, and we go back and forth. We could be saying, I'm grateful to have great health insurance, and grateful that I have wonderful friends. I'm grateful that we're able to walk together. And then she'd have her 3. That in itself, as simple as it sounds, is such a powerful way to shift out of a negative victim mindset, because now you're not focused on what's wrong, you're focused on what's right. And at any moment in time, as bad as things look, there's definitely things that are positive and right in our universe. So that was one of the things we used that started us on a path, which we can touch on later, to be advocates for people that are cancer patients and caregivers. And since we walked that journey ourselves and step by step got back to the place where I had to go through chemo, radiation, and ultimately surgery, I was able to come back to the job and have a great rest of my career. But as I said, I know people who had to medically retire in the peak of their career, and how devastating that is when you love your job. That just made me want to get back that much more. And so in a long-term scenario, which I never would have envisioned, with our podcast, we've done a couple of documentaries. One of them is on retirement, We did interview some people who had to medically retire, and I just felt for them, more than anyone, because I knew what they had gone through. So you have to look at every day, every gift, every shift that we do on the job as a gift. It's like we are blessed to be able to do this job and be able to do it, shift after shift, year after year. And we just have to appreciate it in the now, because you don't know what's going to happen, in the next hour. The stress is enormous. And as we know, stress is probably, the root of a lot of illness. So if you have someone, if a caregiver has a loved one who's extremely ill and needs to be taken to, to the hospital, to the doctor, appointments, needs a lot of attention, their own self-care falls by the wayside. We talked a little bit about that in the book, where how can you take care of yourself and feed the needs, so that your bucket isn't empty. You need to also making sure that you've got some reserve in your bucket, or you're not going to be able to be helpful to your loved ones. So it's all boils down to resilience at the end of the day, right? Resilience as patients, caregivers, first responders. There's got to be something better out there. But it wasn't until a couple of years later, when the chief brought in a team from this Fairfield County Trauma Response Team, 2 clinicians and a first responder, gave their presentation talking about EMDR, and having a first responder there, I think it's much more relatable for all of us to hear it from one of our own. I heard this clinician speaking, and I'm like, wow, she knows what she's talking about. I could actually relate to her as a therapist if I needed one. And that wound up opening all the doors that have led us to where we are right now, hosting this podcast. So again, you never know sort of what's presenting in front of you that's going to become your next opportunity to go someplace you never anticipated. But be open to making that choice to go through the door or not.